so glad you're here tonight. Now, I want you to admire our new system of blinds, because you see we have a room darkening we didn't used to. Yeah. So if this were a year or two ago, it would still be really bright at this time of day. He said, you know, we need to be able to darken the room at 6:30 p.m. Anyway, thank you all for coming. I want to tell you about some site. This year, the grand tasting is going to be at the Addison. Beautiful venue. That's Mr. Miser's headquarters building. And we hope you all will avail yourself of that. In April 13th, we are going to have a special program in conjunction with our Mid-Century Modern exhibit at St. Gregory's Church, which is just a couple of blocks east of here. We're going to have a tour of that sanctuary, which is very mid-mod. And then we'll have, by Buzz McCall, who is Howard, our architect here, son, he told me he did actually work on the building, or did not work, as the case may be, because he told me he goofed off a lot. When he was supposed to be working, he was a teenager. Mr. Derek Vanderploeg, and they will guide us through the building, and then we're going to meet in the Harris Hall for a talk by Tony Abadi, who is a longtime local architect, FAU professor, and quite knowledgeable on this style of architecture. April 19th, we're going to have our next town hall tea time. So that's sort of like town hall talks. That's going to be at 2 p.m. And we're going to have a very special program with representatives of the different special collections at FAU, like the Jackie Paper Art Collection and the University Archive. Should be quite interesting. So we hope you will attend that. Now, in your chairs, we have membership forms, and if you're interested in becoming a member, we strongly encourage that. But we also have surveys. Hi, folks, we just got started. We also have survey forms. If you all would please take the time to fill out a survey. I know you've done one before. It doesn't matter. We're going to ask you to do another survey because we have a quota we have to fill, complete for our county grants. And so we really appreciate you. I want to say a big thank you to Joyce Leah and Tom for the beautiful spread you see tonight. Yeah. It does have a St. Patty's Day theme. And notice the Rice Krispie treats have Lucky Charms. And there's a lot of green, okay? So our thanks as always, they do such a wonderful job. That's part of the fun of coming to Town Hall, isn't it? So I want to introduce a wonderful friend and a very supportive person to our Historical Society tonight, Mr. Chris Davenport. Chris is the Palm Beach County's Historic Preservation Officer. He's an archaeologist specializing in zooarchaeology, which is the identification of animal and human remains. He's an adjunct professor at FAU. And was a lead archaeologist in recording 33 new archaeological sites on Lake Okeechobee area when we had that drought back in 2007, 2009. So that was kind of a rare opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for an archaeologist. In 2010, he led excavations on a portion of a buried sand mound in Dubois Park and is currently researching the large indigenous Native American mound complexes around the Everglades. We just had a discussion about that. Now, he's going to be talking about a time, I said, Chris, can you talk about the Pleistocene? We were sitting at lunch, and I was reading an article about megafauna. I said, well, number one, that's either a hard rock band, or we're talking about another geologic era. And my fellow lunchers said, what is that? I said, we need to talk about that. So, Chris, here you go.
Okay. I don't think I need a mic. Plus, I'm a walker and talker, so I'm going to be moving back and forth. For whatever reason, archaeologists are really technologically inept. So at some point tonight, I'm going to screw this up. All right. So the Pleistocene, what most people will know as the Pleistocene, was actually the last ice age. That was the very tail end of it. It is one of my favorite topics in archaeology and prehistory. There's so much going on environmentally, sea level rise, extinction, comet strikes. It's got everything you can want and more. So I was really excited to give a talk tonight. So to give you some idea how far the Pleistocene actually is, it starts out at 2.4 million years ago when our ancient ancestors, Homo habilis, were just kind of getting their act together, and it ends up to about 10,000 years ago. And there's a lot of overlap going on. So we have Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, all fall in the Pleistocene. Okay, so we're going from, fairly primitive tools, not fully walking upright, to Homer. Okay, you'll see a lot of Simpsons references. So it's also a time of climatic change. And this top part here, this 4-stage model, this is kind of the old model. This is what I was taught. And there are cold periods, which are in blue, and then there's the yellow periods, which are in warm. So the climate is really doing these hard, fast turns throughout this time. Now, 2 of these periods have been debunked. Like geologists have gone back, paleontologists have gone back, not archaeologists, have gone back and said, you know what, I don't think this is real. And the reason for that is it's not some big conspiracy, because that's what everybody runs to. It's actually, we have really good ice core data now from the poles, and from some frozen lakes in Europe. And what we're looking at there, not only are we looking at the trapped carbon dioxide that's in the ice, but we're also looking at dust particles, we're looking at pollen spores. So, when you're talking 400,000 years, most people can't wrap their head around that time frame. Okay? Everything we've done is in this little sliver at the end. Okay? That's when the pyramids were built, that's when Stonehenge was built, that's when Rome rose and fell, that's when Genghis Khan went around and killed 10% of the world's population, all in this tiny little blip at the end. Okay. What does an ice age look like? People don't really understand an ice age. It's hard to get your mind around it. Okay. This is what we look like today. This is the ice cover and the elevation of the mountains. About 18,000 years ago, everything on the left-hand side that you can see there was covered in ice. And I'm not talking an inch or 2 or a foot or 2 of ice. I am talking at least a mile of ice. Think of Greenland. Okay, that level of ice. Okay. To give you some idea, this is a photo of what's going on north of us right now. This is a satellite imagery of all the snow that's fallen, and those dark streaks are actually the Great Lakes. Okay? That's just snowfall. But what's interesting about this photo is where the snow has fallen is basically where the glaciers sat. It's almost a 1-to-1 correlation in this photo, which is why I love it. Now, obviously, the Great Lakes wouldn't have been visible. They would have been a mile under ice. To give you some idea what that would have looked like, you could have stood at modern-day Baltimore and looked north into Pennsylvania and literally seen a mile-high glacier. Think of the Rockies. Mile high. No joke. That's what an ice age is. That much water locked up messed with our environment, messed with our temperature, and there's actually 2 states to this day which gain upwards of 1 inch of elevation every year. Maine and Washington State. It's called eustatic rebound. The weight of the glaciers, all that ice on those 2 states, pushed those states down into the ground. To this day, they are still bouncing back to where they were. That's the amount of weight that were in these glaciers. So, Florida. Guess what? It was never cold here. But it was much, much larger. Okay, so the green, everything you see here in the dark green was 300 feet lower than today. Florida is a third. Our little state that we see here is a third of its original size. That's how much land we've lost to sea level rise since 18,000 years ago. You know, when you watch news and everybody gets worked up, oh my God, sea level rise. Guys, it's been happening for 18,000 years. This should not be news. This is Florida. It's gone underwater in the past. It will go underwater again. It's come out of the water. Welcome to deep time geology. Okay. And as you can see, the colors change as time goes. So this lighter green is 8,000 years ago. Native Americans are actually living in Palm Beach County at that time. And you can see how large it was. And then the last one is 6,000 years ago. And you can see it was 100 feet lower. Okay. This is quick sea level rise, geologically speaking. We find archaeological sites all in the Gulf of Mexico that date to this time period. So people are like, well, how do you know people live there? Because we find their sites. Okay. There is a burial site that has been found off of Sanibel that the state had to get in because divers were looting it, pulling up complete artifacts that date to about 8,000 years ago. Very rare, literally human remains were just left on the ocean floor. And the state had to go out and get involved and put a stop to it. That, out here, people were living. Okay, it's about 35 feet of water now. Okay. So what did we have? We would not want to have been here. Okay, absolutely not. So we have mammoth, mastodon, we had dire wolves, we had llamas. People don't think of llamas as being in North America. They were here. Okay. We had peccaries and tapirs and bison. We had big bison. And my favorite thing, the giant armadillo. Okay. So Native Americans were here. They were actively hunting some of these animals, not all of them. And when I'm teaching an FAU, what I tell students is, you know, they're not out there with high-powered guns. They're out there with spears. So I said, this is how I need you to think of it. I want you to get a BB gun. I want you to go out on I-95 at about 3 o'clock in the morning when traffic's actually moving. I want you to step out in front of an 18-wheeler and stop it with that BB gun. That's what it would have been like trying to take those boys on. Okay? No, there's fish. There's always fish in Florida. Fish are much safer than any of these animals. But all of these animals are actually represented in the fossil record here in Palm Beach County. Okay? We're going to talk about that a little more. South America was even wilder. Okay? They had the terror birds, which if you don't know what a terror bird is, it's take a Tyrannosaurus rex and cross it with an ostrich. It's kind of what you had. They were very carnivorous. They would run down prey. They could take down a llama with no effort whatsoever. You had Glyptodon, which is this giant thing here. That's the size of a modern VW bug. So if you think about trying to stop that, and the South American Native Americans actually did hunt those things. Okay? Yeah. I still take Glyptodon over an elephant any day. You know, that moves a lot slower. And then, of course, the giant ground sloths. Everybody's favorite giant ground sloths. And there are a lot of ground sloths. Most everybody, when you think about it, thinks about Epiritherium and Megatherium. Those are the big boys. Okay? There's a lot more giant ground sloths. We have them here. In fact, South Florida Water Management District, I don't know, 5 years before COVID, actually dug one up almost completely intact in one of their stormwater treatment areas. It was a big find. Pretty cool. Now, we have these giant creatures to thank for avocados. There was a recent study done that's, and this is the title of it, had the giant ground sloths not eaten those, we would not have them today. They used to poop their pits out, which would fertilize, and we get avocados. And what we're trying to figure out now is how the plant survived in the absence of its number one spreader. It should have gone extinct. So what's stepping up and replacing Megatherium? These people, yeah, well, could be. Now, giant ground sloths, they move pretty slow. They do. We know that from fossil track records. You would think they would be very easy to kill. Megatherium's got a secret. It has what are called osteoderms. Who knows their Latin? What's osteo? Bone. What's derm? Skin. Yeah, they're effectively armor plated under their hide. And guess what? We have yet to find a Megatherium or any giant ground sloth that had been killed and eaten by the ancient Native Americans. You would have been hard-pressed to damage that thing at all. Okay, it's terrifying. Okay. Now, Native Americans, they did not use bows and arrows. Bows and arrows hadn't been invented yet. So no bows and arrows. They actually used this tool that's called an atlatl. It's a spear thrower, and it's an amazing piece of technology. It's actually a varsity sport, I'll have you know. Atlatling is a varsity sport now, and I'm pleased to report that my undergrad school took the first ever atlatl championship in the nation, so I really pushed this. They do this at FAU now, and it's all about physics. Okay. Basically, as you can see in the drawing and how this lady is holding it here, it hooks to the end of the spear, and what it effectively does is it extends your arm, which allows you to put more force and more inertia into that spear as it's flying. Now, to tell you how effective this is, my son was probably 10, and we had an atlatl, because that's what archaeologists do. And I gave him the spear, and I said, okay, Connor, go throw it at the target. He could get it maybe 30 feet with his arm. I don't want to get 30 feet close to any of those animals up there. Here's my 10-year-old son. I give him the atlatl, he can damn near throw that thing 70 feet. That's the difference. Okay, doubling it. Now, you can add weight. You can see this little stone weight hanging off the bottom of it. That puts even more weight, which then transfers into inertia. So you can really get this thing going. Now, today's atlatl darts do not have a detachable end. In the past, they had a detachable end, and nobody really understood why until an archaeologist named Vance Hayes went out and did experimental archaeology. And what he did is he hollowed out the end of the shaft, put the dart tip in there, and they threw it at a dead cow, because archaeologists. The dart hit the cow and went in, but what are some rules in physics? Every action has opposite and equal reaction. So when that inertia hit and it stopped, the rebound was enough to pop the shaft off. This is not one shot, one kill. When you're using an atlatl, this is literally throwing 10, 15 spears into an animal in its death throes while it's running. This is not a quick, painless death. But all they had to do was carry extra darts, grab the shaft that had popped off, shove the next dart in, and go for that second, third, fourth shot. Brilliant technology. Instead of trying to run with 15 long shafts through the woods, doesn't work. So atlatls, no bows and arrows. Okay? If you're going to take down big game, you need big points. Okay? So this is a Clovis point. This is the classic. This is what we all learned back in the Stone Age when I was a kid. These were the big points we all learned. They are about that big. Okay. You couldn't, this is how we know they're not bows and arrows. You could not put that on an arrow and shoot it out a bow because it's going to go from about me to you and hit the ground. Doesn't work. Okay. And everybody, you can see where all these are found. Now, these are supposed to be the first people that came into the New World. That's what we were all taught. And you can see, down here in South Florida, we don't have any. Really? But you can see in the American. Okay, so the old school, they're all tightly clustered. What I learned back in the Stone Age was Clovis was first. Those were the first people in North America. Okay, that theory is gone, dead, buried. Thank God, it was a horrible theory. It lasted to about the 1990s, and basically it stated nobody was here before 12,000 years ago. So archaeologists, when we hit 12,000 years, guess what we did? We stopped digging because there's nothing here. How do you know? Because there was nothing here before 12,000 years ago. Well, how do you know? Because we stopped digging. Hello, circular logic. Okay. We thought Clovis people only hunted big game. They're only taking mammoths and mastodons and bison and things like that. And because of that, the oldest sites should be in Alaska and the youngest sites be in South America. Well, I was an undergrad when this was going all in, and I didn't believe any of this, and I said, no, people are here 15,000 years ago. I can't accept 12,000 because there's no way you get from Alaska to the tip of South America in 1,000 years. There's no way. And populate the rest of North and South America. Yeah, have you tried to go on a car trip with a 4-year-old? Good luck. Now imagine without the car and looking for saber-toothed lions and American lions and all the other predators. Okay? And we really got hammered. Like I got a B in the class and I'm still bitter about it because I didn't have evidence. It was just a statement. Okay. So, all that changed with this site down here called Monteverde. Monteverde was found by Thomas Dillehay, an American archaeologist at the University of Kentucky, who actually teaches full-time in Chile. And he didn't find it. A local farmer found this site and said, hey, I need somebody to look at this. Could you come up into the mountains and look at this? And Tom was reluctant. He finally went. And he's like, you know, this is a really odd place to have a site. And he dated it, and the dates came back 1,000 years. So jump ahead, I'm in grad school. And let me tell you something about archaeologists. We have a really well-earned reputation for working hard and partying even harder. So when you're at a conference, and usually you get the graduate students to do the papers in the morning because nobody's up and functioning yet, they put Tom Dillehay 8 o'clock in the morning. And I went to his talk because it's early. It's not this 12,000-year-old stuff. I was one of about 5 people in the audience. And this tells you how long ago. He had 2 carousels of slides. Not 1, 2. For the young people in the audience, carousels are how we used to do PowerPoint. Okay? And he sat up there. He didn't say anything. He just held down both buttons, and one slide would come up with artifacts, the next slide would come up with artifacts, the next slide would come up with artifacts, the next slide would come. And he walked off, and he's right at the end, he goes, don't ever doubt me, and walked off stage. What I didn't know, because I was a young, dumb graduate student, is they had just had a big meeting, and all the accepted archaeologists, all the old dogma, had to say, you know what, Tom? You're right. Our paradigms are completely wrong. And they had, prior to that, they had tried to get him fired. They tried to get his tenure revoked. They did everything they could to blackball him because clearly he's a nut. You can't touch Tom Dillehay's methods. They are perfect. And he won. Since then, all these other sites have been found. Okay? And we think that the way the Native Americans came in was not by this mysterious, mythical, ice-free corridor that we were all taught, but came in by boat. Okay? And one of the things that I always got stuck with is they didn't have boats. You've got no evidence of boats. Anybody know when Australia was settled? 60,000 years ago. The only way to get to it, there is not a land bridge, was by boat. So you're telling me 60,000 years ago the Aborigines figured it out, but the Native Americans couldn't figure out how to build a boat. Really, guys? Yeah. All right, so this idea is catching on, and one of the things they talk about is this kelp highway. Okay, if you've ever been on the west coast of the United States or up in Alaska, when you look out, you see these massive kelp forests. These are some of the most productive environments on the planet. Easily, you don't have to worry about navigating, you just see the kelp. If you see the kelp, you know where the shore is. You can navigate. You don't need to see the stars. You just stay in the kelp. You can get any number of seals, walruses, fish, sea otters, seabirds, whatever you want. There's food. And guess what? Finding fresh water is not difficult. You're hugging the coast. When you find a river, go up till you get fresh water. Go back out. You can keep going. Okay? So, this study has found, oh look, we have all these really crazy early points, including the Channel Islands in California, all the way down. There's Monteverde, 14.5, all the way up. Hey, Page Latson, that's in Florida. We're going to talk about that. Okay? And lo and behold, if you look at the shapes of these points, not a single one of them looks like a Clovis. Not a single one. Okay? So this is the most recent data. This is actually a slide I use in class. And the blue, as you can see, those are the accepted dates. The red, the pink are maybe dates. The red are you're smoking something funny dates. Okay? So Topper in South Carolina, you can see the accepted dates are 12 to 13,000. You can see the pink dates go up to 20,000. They have a date of 50,000 years that they swear is out of a hearth. Not many people, including me, are buying that 50,000 year date. Okay, that's pretty old, guys. Neanderthals are still running around in Spain at that point. Okay. The big one that just made the news is this fourth one down, White Sands, New Mexico, at 24,000 years ago. You can go back a year and a half ago and look for this. They found fossilized footprints in the sand in White Sands, New Mexico. Does White Sands, New Mexico ring a bell to anybody? What's White Sands, New Mexico? What's special about it?
Right stuff.
Yeah, it's where the giant mushrooms grow. That's where we did all the nuclear testing. Okay, White Sands Missile Range. They have a lot of archaeology over there. They really do. People don't realize how A, big that area is, and B, how much archaeology is still there. So they were actually dating fossilized pollen that got pushed into the mud from the bottom of the person's foot and then preserved. 24,000 years ago. Okay, that's a long time ago. But you can notice, let's see, where's Clovis? Yeah, these are all of our, quote, early sites. That's all the new stuff. It's amazing what happens when you actually dig deeper than 12,000 years ago. Yeah. Okay. So, real early snowbirds, the Florida Pleistocene. At the beginning of the Pleistocene, 1.2 million years ago, so when Homo habilis was running around in Africa, the green is what our state looked like. Take a good look at it, folks. South Florida was well underwater. Okay. Jump up to about 120,000 years ago, and a little bit more of Florida has come out of the water. But yeah, we would be in about 45 feet of water right now. Welcome to Boca. Okay. 20,000, so 100,000 years later, which geologically isn't in a blink of an eye. That's how fast that is geologically. Florida is huge. So this interglacial, this 100,000 is what we're looking at there, that temperature spike when it got really, really, really warm. Okay. When Florida grows, we're actually looking, believe it or not, at just one of these really small dips. We're not even looking at the big dips. Just a few degrees, guys, is enough to make a huge difference. Like if Yosemite, or not Yosemite, Yellowstone, let's say Yellowstone burps, it's ready to burp. If that drops global temperatures by 5 degrees, Boca's going to be in the highlands. We won't be near the water. Okay? That's the level of change. So 30 to 15,000 years ago, our area would have been like a dry oak hammock. We would not have had cypress. There would not have been a lot of standing water. Okay? There would have been effectively cenotes. If anybody's been to Mexico, you know what a cenote is. It's basically a sinkhole with water in the bottom. That was Florida. Okay? That's when the ground sloths and the mammoths and these creatures are running around that would terrify us today. 15,000 to 10,000, the climate's changing just enough where we're starting to get pines. Pines are starting to show up, okay? And terrible saw palmetto. If anybody knows me that's been in the field with me, I hate saw palmetto. You can't see the ground, and it takes a gallon of blood every single time. Starting about 8,000 years ago, we reach the modern environment. It gets really wet. Cypress trees show up. Sawgrass shows up. Okay? Now, these are our well-known early paleo sites. Okay? So Vero Beach had a site. It's been in the news recently. Harney Flats, Warm Mineral Springs, Silver Springs, and then way up in the Panhandle. Okay? So this is the Waukulla River, and this is a giant bison. This is Bison antiquus. This bison, its head would have been halfway up in this room. That's how big it is. What they're pointing at there is a broken spear point that is embedded in the animal's skull. That didn't kill it. It actually healed. Okay? So the hunter probably died because that bison would have been really ticked off at that point. But it's coming out of this area up there. These are our early points. These are not Clovis points, but this would be our equivalent. These are called Swanees. Okay, and you can see they're pretty much all up in central Florida. Okay, and this is where Paige Latson is found. Paige Latson blew the doors off of American archaeologists not that long ago because it's a 14,500 year date, which is equivalent to Monteverdi, the site that blew all the doors off of everybody and made us question our paradigms. Okay? And you can't deny that that's an artifact. That's not made by nature, that's made by humans. Okay? This is the site, it's underwater. They're actually diving in the water to get it. It's in a cut bank. And you can see here where they have flakes and bones and everything else. And it's pretty amazing stuff. Okay? I like to show this to people because I always have to beg for money. These are all carbon dates. Everything on here is a carbon date. Each one of those carbon dates is $600 to $700. There's $21,000 of money in those two slides. That's how expensive carbon dating is. So people always ask me, what's the site date to? I have to give a relative date because I don't have $700 of taxpayer money to go, can you date this for me? And generally you don't do, I do a single date because that's all the money we have. You really should be doing dates like that to confirm that your site is indeed that old. So this is actually one of the things they found. This is a tusk of a mammoth, mastodon, sorry. And this is from Alaska. It's actually one of the best slides I've ever stolen off the internet of what it would have looked like to butcher an animal this size. Like this wasn't a 2-hour thing and done. This was, you were working for at least a day to skin, gut, and process this animal. Okay? And what they found, this is a close-up here, these lines are actually cut marks on the ivory Why are they trying to cut the ivory? Okay, well, it just so happens that this is from, I think, Warm Mineral Springs, I think is where this is from. These are ivory foreshafts. Well, what's a foreshaft? We've talked about foreshafts. That's what the darts were attached to in Florida. And Jim Dunbar is the state's leading expert on Paleo-Indian stuff. He's written more books about Paleo-Indian. The man can walk, I swear, just walk on the ground and go, there's a paleo site over there. Guys, I've been doing this since I was 7. I was one of those really weird kids that always knew what he wanted to be. 40 plus years of doing this now, I've never worked on a paleo site. They're rare. They're hard to find. Jim swings a cat and hits 5 of them. I don't understand it. But Jim is just an amazing resource. We're so lucky to have him. And this is where he's working. So this was another talk that was online. I gave the thing, I stole it, but I'm giving credit. That's where the Page, Latson, and Wakulla Spring sites are. And everybody's like, oh, they were coastal back then. No, Florida was huge. These were the hillbillies. These are not the beach bums. Okay? The beach guys are out here in the Gulf, and we find their sites. We just don't find mammoth and mastodon remains with them. We only find rocks. But it's huge. Okay? So there's Warm Mineral Springs. This was one of the early ones that dates to 12,000. Nobody had a problem with Warm Mineral Springs because, hey, it's 12,000 years ago. It's within our accepted time range. So this is it. And this is very early. This is in the 70s. I was doing archaeology, but I was a kid at this point. And this came out and made all the news. And you need to understand the skill that these people had working underwater to excavate a square unit with straight walls. Underwater. That's what they're doing. And what you see here, all these black and white lines, those are stratigraphy. Those are periods of occupation, periods of abandonment, reoccupation, reabandonment. But that's what you're seeing. And that's a big old point hanging right in the profile. So this is what Warm Mineral Springs would look like in cross-section if we could cut it in half and look at it. So about 14,000 years ago, that's where the water would have been, way down the bottom. Okay. The artifacts that they were looking at were up at that second blue line, and then this kills me. That is all sediment that fell into Warm Mineral Springs that is going to be loaded with a few artifacts, but amazing environmental data, pollen, carbon, things like that. Nobody's ever excavated it. Nobody's tested it. Nobody's looked down. And that's because it's in 70 meters of water. It's deep. Okay? So Little Salt Springs in the 1980s made all the news. It's just up the road from Warm Mineral, and it dated to about 10.5. Okay, fine, it's Paleo-Indian. But what was cool is they actually found a giant tortoise. We had giant turtles back then. Everything was bigger. Everything was bigger in the Pleistocene. And it had a stick without a point piercing the carapace, and the carapace had showed signs of being burnt. So not only did they kill it, but they cooked it. Okay. So here you can see the artist's rendition of the giant tortoise on its back and the guys going dinner served. Okay. Steve Koski, if you ever sue, I'm putting a pitch for him. If Steve ever comes, you need to see it. Steve was a young man when they first started doing it. He's now the keeper. Amazing archaeologist, excellent speaker. In fact, I think he's doing a Zoom call at some point in the near future for a group. I have to double check that. But 14,000 years ago, that's where the water was. 9,000 years ago, that's where the water was. So in 5,000 years, all of it fills up, and then guess what happens? 5,000 years ago, the water level drops. So a lot of the cool artifacts they have are actually coming from above that, but there is stuff down at that deeper level. Okay? These are some of the artifacts they have found. This is amazing. Okay, we don't get to see, I mean, in Florida we do. We're very fortunate in Florida that a lot of the prehistoric artwork preserves. You go to New England, bone preservation sucks. You go to the mid-Atlantics, unless you're in a shell midden, bone preservation sucks. We got really lucky in Florida. We get amazing bone preservation. All right, so we actually get to see the artwork. 28 marks on an antler tine. If you've ever held an antler tine, they're hard. They're not easy to cut. They're not easy to scratch. What's so special about 28 marks? Calendar. Very good. Calendar for who? It's a people calendar. It's a specific people. Women. Cycle. Counting cycles. Now, that's not confirmed, but they have similar artifacts of similar time periods in other places with 28 marks. Okay, okay, so this is what's called a digital elevation model. LiDAR is used to make it. The darker colors are high, the lower color, the greens are low. Because imagine that, Palm Beach County's really flat and really low. Okay. So you'll read in all the archaeology books, there's no Paleo-Indian sites in South Florida. First off, nobody ever defines what is South Florida. Is that South Florida? Because in which case, Palm Beach County is in North Florida. Is that South Florida? Because, yeah, okay, sure. I know a lot of people in Okeechobee County say, we ain't part of South Florida. Or is that South Florida? Boy, do people in Tampa get pissed off when you tell them that. Okay. Nobody ever defines what South Florida is. You know, I'm sure the people go in the Keys go, oh no, you all are Northerners. Okay? So, the problem is, because nobody defines it, we can't tell where sites are. Okay? All these little black dots that you see on this map are known Paleo-Indian sites. Known. Hello? Broward County. We have a known Paleo-Indian site in Broward County. Don't tell me there's not Paleo-Indian sites in South Florida. Okay? What I'm showing here are the three stages of the Kissimmee, Okeechobee, Everglades Basin. Right? So the light gray is the Kissimmee, the medium gray is the Okeechobee Basin, and the dark gray is the Everglades. In Palm Beach County alone, we have any number of Pleistocene sites. Now, a lot of the red dots are isolated mammoth or mastodon teeth. Why do we have so many mastodon and mammoth teeth? Does anybody know? How many teeth does how many teeth does an elephant have? This is why I'm a zoark. 4. They get 4 teeth. That's it. 4. And as they wear out, they move forward and the old one falls out their mouth. So, yeah, they're called spit teeth. They literally are eating one day and now they're down to 3 teeth. Okay. So a lot of those are deceiving. I mean, they lost teeth frequently. So to understand our little area, Palm Beach County, people don't realize how big Palm Beach County actually is. We are the same size as Delaware. Now, this is a shameless plug for my position. Delaware has like 17 people on their staff. I got 2. They have 17,000 sites. We have 300. And it's not because people weren't here, it's because nobody's been looking for them. Okay, that's really pathetic. Yeah, well, I'm always looking. So one of the things in the Pleistocene that always freaks people out, what this map is showing, where I got this data, this is actually the NOAA map, and it shows where the continental shelf is located. the closest the continental shelf comes to the United States is from Boca to North Miami. So if you were here 17,000 years ago, we would have looked like the cliffs of Dover. You literally would have gone up and it would have been 300 feet nearly straight down to the ocean.
Oh my goodness.
Okay? So yeah, that's what Palm Beach County would have looked like. And these are the animals that we have present. Guess what? The possum was here. The possum was never megafauna. It never got big. It's the same pathetic little size. The raccoon was the same pathetic little size. The otters were a little bit bigger. Not much, but a little bit bigger. And we had bowfin. If you don't know what bowfin is, it's an incredibly primitive fish with a mouthful of teeth that fishermen will catch and inevitably try to get the hook out and pull back hamburger from their teeth on the finger. We had gar is another common. We had horse. People don't realize we had horse involved and populated all of Europe in the old world, and they all died out here about 8,000 years ago. So between disease, low population numbers, and being on the menu, horses went extinct. We had this little kitty here. This is the African lion. That's the American lion. That was about the size. It's hard to get a thing. La Brea Tar Pits in California actually has a great model of this. They have an American lion skeleton back to back with a modern horse skeleton. The lion's bigger than a modern horse. I would not want to be walking around Palm Beach County with a spear, with that walking around with us. Okay? We had dire wolves. That's 200 pounds, 300 pounds of really ticked off pack predators. I don't want to be around them either. Okay? We also had jaguar. Jaguar remains were actually found in a fossil site where 95 and the Turnpike cross Indiantown Road. Jaguars, because the rest of those predators weren't bad enough. Okay? This was a big day. This was not found by me, but this was found by collectors, artifact collectors that I know in the glades during the drought of Lake Okeechobee, and 3 of these things were found. And I thought this was a preform. So basically the Native Americans, what they would do is they would get what's called a blank down to the proper size, so then they could carry less rock and make a smaller arrowhead or 2 arrowheads later down the road. I thought it was a preform. And no, that is a really rare Paleo-Indian point called a Helen Blazes site, or Helen Blazes point. So this is it, and this is another reason why I love Jim Dunbar, because I said, you know, I got this really weird point. Well, you look at it, and Jim's like, oh yeah, that's a Helen Blazes point. I'm looking online. There's no Helen Blazes point. I'm going through the old journals. There's no Helen Blazes point. Where the hell are you coming up with this, Jim? Like, okay, it's one place only, a 1954 master, PhD in University of Florida Special Collections. How's anybody supposed to know this? One copy, one school, locked away. Thank you, Jim Dunbar. Okay, because I never would have found that. This was an exciting find. This is actually mammoth ivory, and it's been modified and carved. I have no idea why. People always ask me. I'm like, I don't know what it is. I have no idea. They did a groove. They made it look like a thing of soap. That was found in Canal Point. That's in a private collection. Okay, I'm happy. I got a photograph of it. Okay. So there's our Helen Blazes site, and then you can see these other very early points. Here's the rub, folks. The early stuff is showing up in the glades, not on the coast. That's counterintuitive than what anybody would think. But if you think about it, the Everglades wouldn't have existed as we know it today. It wouldn't have been swampy. It would have been drier, but it's still the low spot. That's where the water collected. That's why the animals are there. That's why all the early points are showing up around Lake Okeechobee. and not on the 300-foot cliff that would have been the Atlantic Ocean. Okay? So in conclusion, the Pleistocene is an amazing time period. Okay? If you're going to study ancient human history, this is the one to study. This is literally when our earliest ancestors leave Africa, go out through Asia and Europe, and eventually all the way to North America. It is the first age of exploration. Okay? That's really what it is. It's not just coming to America, it's going into Asia, going into India, going into Russia. That's the time period we're talking about. Climatologically, the Pleistocene was all over. It was really, really hot. It was really, really cold, and it just constantly fluctuated. For 1.2 million years, that temperature was going 40-degree turns. Not 2 degrees that we all freak out about today, 40 degrees. Imagine if it was 40 degrees hotter than today. Would you want to be in South Florida? No. All right. But given the lack of our state's topography, especially down here, this had a dramatic effect on what was exposed and what wasn't. So that's one of the reasons we have a really hard time finding these early sites in Florida. If you're interested in this, this is a dated reference. It's available online for free at the Florida Anthropologist. You can go in. This is from the 1980s, so it's going to be, there's nothing here before 12,000 years ago. But other than that, the information is all relevant. And then these are some of the most recent books. So this one, New Directions in the Search for the First Floridians, I don't even have yet. It's that new. This is Jim Dunbar's book, Harney Flats. This is Thomas Dillehay. This is a condensed version. There's 2 sets of books. There's the Smithsonian volumes, which is 2 1,000-page volumes for Monteverdi. Don't buy that one. Buy that one. It's the condensed version. It's the Reader's Digest version. It's a lot more enjoyable to read. And then Paleo-Indians and Early Archaic by Ken Sassman, who's the professor up at UF. That's from the 1990s. Even that's getting long in the tooth, dated now. But these are the best references there are for the Florida Pleistocene. Okay? And so with that, I will take questions. Yes?
Okay, so I have two-part question.
Uh-oh.
I used to work at the Fort Lauderdale Historical Society. We did indeed have a Mastodon tooth, and I can tell you what rock pit it came out of.
Mm-hmm.
You know where 595 and Davy Road are?
Yes.
Okay.
I hate that intersection.
Burning Crest Village, okay? It was a rock pit. That's where it's found.
Cool.
Number 2, my dad, I was telling him about your talk. He was 97.
Mm-hmm.
He grew up in Lake City, Columbia County.
Mm-hmm.
He said, Sue, he remembered in the 40s, giant tortoises there. I said, Dad, were they escaped from the alligator farm? He said, Sue, I don't know, but I always heard about them and you did see one. Could they possibly be survivors? Have you ever heard of such?
I have not heard of giant tortoises, but without being able to see the animal itself, I can't tell you if it's some exotic pet that got loose or...
He said, the story was there were multiples. He only saw one, and this was in the wild. And I had tried doing a little quick research online. Nothing in newspapers.com. Nothing really out in the country.
I don't know. It's possible. Strange things have happened. You know, but exotics getting loose in Florida is nothing new.
Right.
Yes.
I read somewhere that the time of the mega animals,
Mm-hmm.
it was the same situation with the carbon rising.
Yes.
So we're in that cycle, right?
Yeah. So carbon has gone up and down throughout history.
Yeah.
Now, in the Roman period, there's a huge spike. But yeah, carbon fluctuates. We see it in the ice cores.
So we should be looking for bigger and bigger, right?
Depending on which way it goes, I mean, yeah, the reason animals get bigger when it's colder is an ecological zoology term called the Bergman-Allen effect. So if you're big and bulky, you retain heat better, which is why all those animals got huge. So that's why our pathetic little key deer are 60 pounds And the same Odocoleus virginianus in Maine will be pushing 300 pounds
Because of the cold.
because of the cold.
Interesting, thank you very much.
No, Chris, I also understand that we didn't have coral reefs back then, right?
I imagine we did, but we haven't gone out and gone through the sediment to look that far down.
Because, you know, it seems like Palm Beach and Broward County, kind of where it is now, the coastline.
Yeah, we really haven't moved.
My understanding was, yeah, it was this deep drop, and then you just went, womp, like you do in the stinky Gulf Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, the continental shelf is right here, folks. Like, it's not far out there. I don't know the answer to that, too. Yeah.
So there's paleoindian sites that are just due south of the thing. I mean, can you give me a better idea of, it was dry? Was it tree islands, or what do you?
Okay, so that's a really long answer. I will give the expedited version. There was a study done in 1974 by a researcher named Parker, who said nothing existed down here before 5,000 years ago. It was barren rock. That's what everybody says. Okay, they're citing a 1974 study that nobody has looked at since 1974. Do large herbivores live on barren rock? No. So, wait a minute, guys. Something's wrong. We've got mammoth and mastodon and camel and horse and bison. There had to be a savanna-like environment. It would have been drier in my mind. We have a hard time finding that evidence. So, I'm not saying it's not out there. I'm just saying it's harder to find.
We have this oblique information that there's these sites.
Right, that date really early when there's not supposed to be anything here. Yeah, something's wrong. Just, yeah, Captain Obvious.
There's still Indians in there.
There are. Any other questions? Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it.